Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Mainfreight's AGM, our 29th annual meeting. So 29 years being public, but the company itself's 46 years old. My name's Bruce Plested and I have much pleasure in opening this 29th annual meeting of Mainfreight. I can confirm that a quorum of shareholders is present. Before commencing the business of the meeting, I've asked to cover some matters of housekeeping. In the case of an emergency, please leave by the nearest safe exit and gather at the assembly point in the car park. Toilets are in both the eastern and western pre-function areas. Eden Park's a non-smoking venue. Please be considerate of others and ensure you observe the usual safe practices. I'd now like to introduce our directors. On my far left are Kate Parsons, Annie Steele, and Don Braid. On my far right are Richard Preble, Hayley Buckley, Brian Mogridge, and Simon Cotter. Not a bad-looking lot, are they? Yeah. You will have received a copy of the notice of meeting that was sent out with the annual report. In terms of the final business, we have 5 resolutions to put before the meeting. We'll cover each resolution in turn and invite questions specific to those items. Voting on each resolution will, as required by the listing rules, be by way of poll, and I will outline the process we will follow at that point. Before attending to the formal business of the meeting, I'd like to share some of my recent thoughts and reflect on the company's past performance and future activities, and then I'll pass over to Group Managing Director Don Braid to address the meeting. The year to March 2024 was the first year in 14 years where our net profit after tax fell from the previous year. The reduction in profit was some 35%, but was against an all-time record high to March 2023. The decline in tax-paid profits continues into the current year, but at a lower level than in the past year. In New Zealand and Australia, where we have been for many years, we expect further profitability improvements in this current year. Our other regions, Asia, Europe, and the US, will take time to find meaningful improvement. It's important for shareholders to understand that the Western world and most other countries have the same problems as New Zealand: faltering education standards, particularly amongst young people, significant inflation flowing into most family costs, growing poverty, levels of crime and homelessness on the streets. The upcoming USA election does not give much confidence of a settled future, neither the behaviour of some of the world's biggest egos. Your company is increasing market share in most countries where we operate, and our long-term vision is assisting us to keep growing where there is opportunity. It is regretful, if not appalling, in New Zealand, when Mainfreight is the 4th largest customer of Kiwi Rail, some say we are bigger than that, behind coal, forestry and milk, that we are not included in the groups making decisions for the future of the Cook Strait ferries. We do have some strong feelings concerning those Cook Strait ferries. We have a very good set of ideas, opinions to put into the conversation, but we have not been invited at this point to the conversations. I cannot believe that we are not invited. It is not a very good sign. We're grateful and proud of our global I'll be calling them international these days, team keeping the freight moving, not just physically, but in keeping us up to date and ahead of the market, in knowing where our freight is at all times with new equipment and systems. We'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge Richard Prebble, our board member since listing on the NZX in 1996, for his wonderful contribution to our company. We were just talking today, he was the one who introduced road user charges. And we wrote on the back of the 2 trucks that we had way back in those days, Richard Prebble owns this truck. Richard's insights and deep intuitive understanding of our business and culture have been invaluable. We will be making a special presentation to Richard at the conclusion of the meeting, and he will be saying a few words. We tried to stop him, but... We welcome 2 new directors to our board, Hayley Buckley and Annie Steele. We're very pleased with contributions both have made in the short time that they've been with us. Their intellect and commercial acumen will serve Mainfreight, its people, its shareholders and stakeholders very well. We look forward to hearing their addresses to you later in the meeting. We do have an interesting year or 2 ahead of us, but with effort and goodwill and a vision for the future, your company will prevail. Likely in more countries, servicing more customers and growing this wonderful business of ours. Thank you very much, and much aroha to the worldwide Mainfreight family. Fellow shareholders, I will now ask Group Managing Director, whose name I've forgotten, Don Braid, to give his presentation. Thank you, Don.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming. Good to see you all here. Good to be back at the home of New Zealand Rugby, home of the All Blacks. A few Aussies in the audience who perhaps don't appreciate that. I've got a friend in the audience who thinks looking back over the past year is a waste of time. He thinks it's you guys are only here to think about the future. And maybe we are too, but I think it's worthwhile that we look back over the financial numbers of the past year to see where we've been, where we've come from and where we're heading. So as Bruce has said, the revenue's down 17% to 4.72 billion, profit down 33 to 395 million. Net profit got knocked around a little bit because this government decided to take away the ability to have deductibility on and depreciation of buildings, sort of on the 28th of March or something, just before the financial year ended. So that was a non-cash effect to our net profit, but it dropped it by another 69 million. People down 667 to 10,644, branches up 6 to 337, and we managed to open in India. The directors thought fit that we would continue to pay a similar dividend to the year before, such as our confidence about heading forward and such as our cash position in the balance sheet. So therefore, for our shareholders that we have in this room, we're delighted to be able to pay a similar dividend on the basis of the profit that we've performed. And of course, our discretionary bonus, which has a great levelling effect. When the profit goes up, we share some more with our people. When the profit comes down, we don't share so much. So that was down 68%. We'll pay out 25 million over the next few weeks to those in our business who have made better profits than the year before. We did expect to do better. New Zealand and Aussie were okay. Asia, the Americas and Europe disappointed us. There's no doubt about that. We felt that we could have done better. We had lease obligations from the high freight volumes of the year before, 22 and 23, freight volumes that we'd never seen before. We had to gear up for that freight. We had to take on more warehousing leases. We had to take on more cross docks. And then we saw the freight volume decrease dramatically. There was not too much that we could do about that. So we're dealing with those, exiting those leases. And our overhead cost structure increased as a consequence of building a bigger business. You know, more team members and more owner-drivers. Here in New Zealand, we had to put on more owner-operators because rail couldn't provide us services. We didn't have enough owner-drivers, and we couldn't move enough by coastal shipping. So we brought on more owner-operators, and they're still with us. We'd like to think that once they join us for life, and we've got to look after them. And that's eroding away a little bit of our margin. The way to deal with that is to continue to grow the business, find more freight. However, we continue to invest capital to expand and improve the network that we've got. Despite this demanding operating environment, we are doing better. And we're experiencing a lot, I suppose, improvement, as you'll see in the numbers. We've grown a bigger business with more customers and greater capability. The results of 24, if you take out 22 and 23, are significantly bigger than what we were in 2021. Just to have a look at those, if you took the revenues in 21 to the revenues in 24, we're up 28.6%. And the same in terms of the profit before tax, it's up 40% from 262 million to 395. Bigger and better business. And a base from which for us to grow bigger again. Balance sheet sort of looks okay. Operating cash flow's all right. Cash collection was okay. We haven't had too much in terms of bad debts. Net capex, we continue to spend about 250 million a year. Last year, the year coming, and the year after. And that's about investing in the network that we've got and the confidence that we have in the business. Net funds, 22 million. I think that was about 56 million on that high profit the year before. Cash at hand. And our bank debt of only 148 million out of a total facility of $500 million. We don't like borrowing too much from those banks. The network growth, 337 countries, up one, and the people. That loss of 667 people, not one redundancy. It was natural attrition as the freight volumes came down, as people started to move on, the world opened up, people started to decide to head offshore or whatever they were doing. So no redundancies, no cost to the business, but getting the operating numbers down to something that related to the freight volumes that we're moving. Our network, it's our strategic advantage. It's diversified across other countries. It's diversified across products, 3 core products. We've got the opportunity to earn money across 27 different countries. One of the reasons why Bruce calling ourselves global is that we're not global yet. We're only international. When we get into about 150 or 200 countries, well, I guess we'll be able to call ourselves global. You'll still be around for that, boss. One thing that I think we should look at in here is that, you know, we're taking a bit of stick for our performance in the Americas and in Europe. Convert that to New Zealand dollars, it's $1 billion in sales in each one of those regions. We ain't going to give away that too easily. So we've got a base, we've got something to work with. The future capital expenditures, I've said, 250 for the next 2 years ahead. And you can see where we're going to spend it, still spending it in New Zealand, spending it in Australia, a little bit in America and a little bit in Europe as we continue to grow the businesses there. Producing high quality facilities and intensifying our network. It's core to what we do. So what is that planned development? 7 new transport facilities here in New Zealand, some leased, but mostly owned. 3 new warehouses, Beach Road, Savile South and Christchurch, because the demand for our warehousing is there. And remember, every piece of freight that goes into a warehouse then moves through our transport network. And hopefully, if our sales team have done the job well enough, we might have brought the freight in from offshore as well. Mostly in those warehouses, we have imported product, beverage, food, DIY, and it's imported. So therefore, we've got a chance to feed the network again, feeding that network, helping us build the business. We showed you a little bit of this photo last year. This is the hazardous goods. It'll be the biggest hazardous goods facility in New Zealand. Is that right, Brinley? The area that's still yet to be built on is where the bunkers will be for all the hazardous goods. But that's an opportunity for our Chem Courier business, which is the transport business. So whatever's inside that building and has to move, Chem Couriers will do the distribution of that product. We showed you this as a shell of a building last year. This is Alderman in South Auckland. It has a rail link with the Port of Auckland. It's taken a little while for Kiwi Rail to get it in place, but that's all right. We're getting used to that. But this is a link between our air and ocean business and our transport business. Devanning ocean freight containers and then feeding that freight into the network or into the warehouses for that matter. High quality facility, one that we've never had before, one that adds more opportunities for us. We're running our tanker division out of there, we run our wharf division out of there, and we run Caratrans from there. Owens and Daily Freight have had shocking facilities and we've ignored them for a long, long time. We've just taken the profit and said thanks very much and then invested the money elsewhere in the network. Here in Auckland, we needed to do something for them. So we've built a high quality facility for Owens ultimately. Daily Freight are in there at the moment, much to the disgust of Owens. But while we pulled down the Daily Freight facility, which we bought off Freightways and did nothing else with it since 1994, and they will reside there for about a year to 15 months until the Daily Freight facility is finished, and then we'll get the Owens boys a new site. The Owens site will then be converted for Chem Couriers. We have this Mainfreight to Home business. Some of you might have experienced our services with Mainfreight to Home. Mostly they do consumer goods. They've grown so well within this New Zealand environment, we needed to build them a new facility and a new warehouse. That'll open in August. In Australia, we haven't forgotten about the Australians. We've got 2 new transport docks, one in Townsville, will be a small one leased, and Willawong in Brisbane, which is a large site for us. I'll show you a picture of it shortly, but will be something different in terms of what we build and transport sites for the future. And 2 air and ocean facilities, one at Melbourne Airport and one in Brisbane, both capable of handling perishable freight, and our perishable air freight ability in Australia is growing quickly alongside our abilities here in New Zealand. This is the new Brisbane site. We haven't broken ground yet, but we're close to awarding the tender. Essentially, it's less square metres for more vehicles. So on this site, we can handle 54 15-metre vehicles at any one time, as against that at Dandenong, which we built, which is a lot bigger, we can only handle 45. So less size in building, less cost in construction, but far more efficient. Why? Because we can end load 34 rear doors. We're trying to convince both our New Zealand and Australian businesses to take on the business of end loading, which makes us more efficient, safer transportation, better on the dock in terms of health and safety, and we think profitability. This is the Moorebank site, which we showed you in construction at the meeting last year. I think it wasn't quite completed. It's finished, 70% utilised, and the inquiry that we have with it, we can't keep up. So we think we're going to have to find somewhere else quite quickly. Robotics. The warehouse is split into refrigeration and ambient. A new customer that's just joined us in that site. Every can of Red Bull that you would buy in Australia, we handle. That site plus a couple of other sites around Australia. So high beverage, high food, a little bit of DIY, and 37 kilometres from the Port of Sydney, serviced by rail, with electric straddle carriers at the far top of the photo that you can see there, placing the containers at the door, and then we load directly from there to our other cross docks across the country. Really efficient site, and pride and joy for us, and probably will set the standard for what we'll do for more warehousing in Australia. In the Americas, we're taking the bold step. 2 new cross docks, one in Dallas, one in Chicago. We have an investor day in October where some of the analyst community who are keen to come and have a look will see how that is progressing. And in Europe, 2 small cross docks, one in Amsterdam, one in Mechelen in Belgium, which is increasing the intensity of our network. Again, the network working, moving freight throughout Europe. That's the Dallas one, current situation. It's about a week old. It's a bold step forward for us. And one in Chicago, and we expect both to be finished sort of late 24, early 25. You can see the construction's different. It's all end loaded, all indoors. Smaller buildings, quicker to put up, and an easier way to move freight because everything's end loaded and unloaded. Those are the lessons that we're trying to bring to the businesses in Australia and New Zealand to make us more efficient. Sustainability. We've now got 8.4 megawatts of solar generation. I think that would power 2,500 houses. We've added battery storage and rainwater capture, another 7 million litres of rainwater capture off the building. So in all those speeches that you've heard Bruce talk about, businesses actually looking after themselves, capturing the water and using the water rather than the mains water, we're doing it. Lowering the impact on our operations, we've now got 84% of our fleet is electric. 46% of our car fleet is hybrid or electric. Unfortunately, we can't bring that electrification to the trucks. It's just not working. We can't get the delivery fleet is small. You know, we've sort of got 12 or so here in New Zealand. We've got similar in Australia. We're trialling it in America. 2 vehicles running off the wharf at Los Angeles will be electric powered. And we've got a great customer in New York City that's asking us to do the deliveries in New York City in an electric van. That's been built, being sign written, and will be running around New York City. But getting bigger vehicles to run line haul just is not working right at this point in time. Bring our partners along for the journey. You know, our carbon tracking platform, we had 50, I think, this time last year utilising it. 500 customers are now signed up on it. And when we're out making sales calls, and I urge you, if you haven't got a copy of this, this is our sustainability report. There's plenty here for you to take away if you're interested. The moment we hand that over and they look at it across the table, we've got them, because the others aren't doing it. And they see how serious we are about sustainability in our business. You know, a quick example, we do Jägermeister, you know, those shots that you take with the Red Bull, by the way. Not that I ever have. But Jägermeister in New York saw that, and within sort of 3 or 4 weeks after some of the team here from New Zealand and Australia went and visited them, they've now given us all their ocean freight from Germany to New York. And a lot of that's to do with that sustainability report. So what we are doing is adding competitive advantage, giving us the opportunity to win more customers and grow the business. We've published our climate risks. It's all up on our website, and you're more than welcome to have a look at that. But I just urge you to view that document. It's a lot easier to read than online. But if you think about the emissions that we've saved, 10% since 2018 while we doubled the business, that's the equivalent of 35,000 cars off the road for a year. So we've doubled the business, increased the efficiency of the business, and reduced the carbon emissions. So this is what the analyst community is sitting amongst you are looking for. This is current trading. This is 15 weeks, 1st of April to the 14th of July, and I'd have to say that the past week was about the same, a little bit better actually, but about the same. So we've got revenue up 8.5%. which is market share that we're taking. Profitability has improved from what we did at the year end, but still we're grafting away in quite a difficult environment. But that revenue is really important to us. We hold on to that and build profit and reduce our overheads as we get our utilisation of line haul better. We'll start to see profit flow from that. If we look at that across the three products, transport, mostly assisted by Australia and Europe in terms of those transport numbers. New Zealand slightly behind, and of course we're not going too well in America with our transport business. Warehousing, assisted by New Zealand and America, where we're going pretty well with our warehousing in the USA. And air and ocean, mostly assisted by Australia, Asia in terms of growth, and America. Finding it hard, exports out of New Zealand, they are down, and we've still got quite a small business in terms of air and ocean in Europe. So, good growth across Australia in terms of transport. New Zealand has experienced reductions in volumes, like from May. Like April was looking pretty good. May started to fall away. June is about the same. Starting to recover a little bit, but it's tough work. Market share, definitely winning new business, but it's not there covering up the current customers' volumes that just don't seem to be there. European transport's going good. You know, we've doubled our profit in Europe versus this time last year for those 15 weeks. USA is going to take some time. It's hard work. We've got small pockets of improvement, but it's a long-term fix. Good performances, I've said, New Zealand and USA for warehousing. You know, again, in Dallas, the analyst community will see a 500,000 square foot warehouse in Dallas that we have there, which is full, and the boys are looking for, and girls are looking for additional facilities. Our New York warehouse has doubled in size. We've put in new automation, new racking, won some new customers, and making good money. European utilisation in terms of warehousing is disappointing. We've got new customers coming, but we would like to have a better performance from them. In terms of air and ocean, Australia performance is going really well ahead of this time last year. They have won some project business, moving batteries around the world, but essentially they really haven't had a dip at all in terms of their performance. New Zealand activity has been impacted by the less export volumes. US and Asia are okay, but it's margins that are under pressure. We expect an earlier peak season in terms of international freight, and I think we can joke about politics, but politics has a role to play. If Trump gets in, then he'll throw 10% duty on all imports into America. That will impact import volumes into America. So we'll see an earlier peak where people will try and move before that occurs. Ocean freight rates have increased, there's no doubt about that, but not to the levels of 22 and 23. You know, they might have gone from sort of 2,000 a container to 6,000, whereas in the peak 22 and 23, they went from sort of 2,000 to 20,000. So we're not in that territory, and we don't expect to be in that territory. However, equipment shortage is a real problem. Trying to get containers in Asia because of the Red Sea situation is really difficult. What are we doing about it? Concerted sales activities. We're all out selling. This team that's sitting here in the front row, busy out selling across the world and here in New Zealand. We had a June sales campaign, I suppose. The team named it the Olympic campaign for obvious reasons. However, in that campaign for just June, 3,892 new business opportunities, and we've already gained 307 new customers. That's across the world, with about 450 salespeople adding to that mix. Really good momentum in Australia. Expect Australia to be our biggest profit performer. I spent a week in sales a few weeks ago in Australia through Sydney and Melbourne. You know, they might be complaining about their economic situation, but to us, it felt strong. You know, we whinge and moan about our restaurant situation, and they are too over there, but the restaurants are busy, they're full. And the volume of freight that we're seeing from the customers that we're meeting is large. And we're unearthing customers that we've never seen before, that we didn't know existed. And I think the competitive situation for us in Australia, where our competitors have fallen by the wayside, and Mainfreight is now being seen as the real alternative. We've actually got a march on the market. Touch wood when I say that. We've got good improvement in European transport, US warehousing and US air and ocean. It's just US transport that's our problem. New Zealand's doing their utmost to find the efficiencies that we need in our line haul and increasing their range of services. You've seen the truck downstairs. Looks pretty cool, right? Moves wine, moves alcoholic beverages. Just one of a few to come, and certainly touching on the refrigeration business. You know, we think that we'll have our hands on some refrigeration facilities in Palmerston North that will aid us to link the movement of refrigerated freight across New Zealand. So another shot in the arm for the New Zealand business. Asia is very focused on margin improvement. It's difficult, whilst there is still space available while the rates have increased, it's difficult to get the margin out of the customer. And we'll be really careful about this network expansion. I know it looks like we've got a lot going on, but it is a bigger business and we are investing the capital where we need to, but we're also very careful about how we're going to improve our returns. It's top of mind. How do we feel about things? Sales opportunities in all markets are substantial. I was on Waiheke last weekend and I had to catch up with Bruce. I showed him an email I sent Dan and said, doesn't matter where we go, there's freight everywhere. One small sales call for a bite to eat at lunchtime, and there's freight coming out of North America, there was freight going to Australia, UK and Switzerland, and we didn't have any of it. We just still continue to see freight on every corner. The opportunities are immense for us. So we remain confident about where we're heading. Yeah, we've had a little bit of a tough start, but we can see the improvements with that revenue that we've got. That 8.5% revenue growth is healthy, and we're looking forward to a busy year. And of course, as Bruce would say, another 99 years in front of us. Thanks very much.
Thank you for that presentation, Don, as usual. There's no bull in it, and it just says it the way that it is. And we've been doing that for a long time, and it's benefited us and our shareholders greatly. This is the formal business part. The annual report, the first formal item on the agenda is to receive and consider the annual report of the company for the year ended 31st of March 2024, including financial statements for that year and the directors' and auditors' reports to shareholders. These documents have been circulated to all shareholders, and further copies are available now if anyone should require one. No resolution is required. However, the floor is open if anybody would like to discuss any aspect of the annual report. Microphones are available, and please state your name for the record. Coralie, you got to say something?
Thank you, Bruce. I always love your chairman's report. I so agree with you about educating children. But in the past few months, we've had absolute nonsense from the Minister of School Lunches about not feeding the children and perhaps a $3 sandwich. And I don't believe children can learn if they're hungry. So I think that kind of goes hand in hand. So the nonsense from him also replicated right from the start nonsense from the Minister of Finance about the Cook Strait ferries. And I just wonder if you would like to share some of your vision to solve this problem about the Cook Strait ferries, and hopefully the media will report it, even if government isn't listening. You can tell the people.
Yes, certainly. I could do that, but Don will do a more adequate job than me. No, I do know what's going on, but Don knows the names of the wharfs and some of those things, which I don't. So could I call on you, Don?
Yeah, thanks very much, mate. Yeah. Well, look, in some respects, we did get the opportunity to speak with the government, not directly, but through this thing called MAG, which is their advisory group. There was a Mark Cairns, who we have a lot of respect for, sitting on the thing, some other politician that I can't remember, but Richard Prebble calls him the little Napoleon or something. And a guy that had worked on the ferries, but mostly in courier. And, you know, we felt that they had not thought deeply about the network, about what the ferries were about, how they connected the State Highway 1 as we saw it, both road and rail. We had the scary feeling that if they could do away with owning the ferries, then they would, that they might privatise them. One of the most sensible things that we've heard of late is the submission by the Port of Napier, which suggests that the container cranes in Wellington don't need to be there, and we would suggest that's correct. It's a very small container port. Use that area, which is seismically already good enough after the 2017 earthquake. So they could put a link span there to cope with the new ferries at very little cost and nothing like the cost that they were talking about at Kaifawhara. And so that's at the Thorndon end of the city. Blue Bridge could be there as well. And it just seems to me that it makes a lot of common sense. So therefore we have similar ferries doing their job and a less infrastructure cost, which was the problem why the minister decided to pull the pin on the project in total. And let's remember, they've already spent $425 million on this proposal already, and they want to write that off. Plus, they'll probably have to write off another $400 million to the Hyundai shipping yard for the ferry contract being cancelled. So there's nearly 800 odd million in the hole already, right? So let's be logical about it. Let's speak to people that are involved in the freight business. You know, sensible decision made by the ports of Napier, who sort of understand what goes on in terms of a healthy operating port. I think the other problem with the centre port, and it will cause a few problems, I guess, if it ever gets reported, but it's owned by the council. And we know how bad that council is in Wellington at the moment. So how could they run an efficient port? Therefore, why not privatise the port, make it a ferry port, maybe a log port, but nothing else? And then those other containers that were moving through those container cranes might go through the Port of Napier or Littleton for that matter, or Auckland and Tauranga, using the rail network to move it. Makes a lot of sense. So there's a lot that they haven't thought about. When we sat down with them, Carl George and myself, Carl's in the room, you know, we asked them what were they going to do with the dangerous goods that moves on the freight vessel at 10 o'clock each night. Oh, we hadn't thought about that. So I think our advice to them would be get the people that understand freight and logistics, understand how the network works, understand what rail means and what road means in this country, and we might come up with a solution that will cost a lot less and be more efficient.
Thank you, Don. I hope all of you understood that. It's using a stable part of the wharf in Wellington to bring the ferries into. It doesn't require much work at all, and take the containers away and work them in another place, preferably probably on the Napier port. It is generally felt that we have too many container ports in our country anyway. The ships don't like necessarily calling at them all, and Napier's already being utilised. Are there any other questions?
Thanks. Mine's Alan Best. I wonder if could ask Mr. Chairman, through you, Don, about the solar panels. What I did notice was that in the more recent buildings, there's an absence of solar panels. It was just from the photographs you showed us, and it may not be right. But I really think that you've done a marvellous job with the recycling of water and your use of power, use of energy that's available. Is there a problem with the most recent economics of solar panelling? No?
Not at all. They will all have solar power. Any new building that we build will capture water to drinkable standard, double filtered, and solar power. You know, and I know it sounds nuts, but it's how we feel about our sustainability and our approach to it. But those 2 lease sites in America, I mean, they were still in construction, of course. Right. Well, you know, they think we're nuts putting solar power in. I mean, they say to us, but in Dallas, the guy pointed to the ground and said, well, all the gas is there, mate. You don't need the sun. You know, our belief is that we do need to use solar power. So we will fund solar panels on the roof of Chicago and Dallas. So every site has solar power.
Fine, thanks.
The reason for the roof not being full is that it's the cost, and we're not trying to light up the whole of the city. We're just trying to run our own facility. No more questions?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Malcolm Stokes. I've been a shareholder in this company for over 20 years. I'm a very happy shareholder. But my question really relates to the first question regarding the ferries and the government's policy on roads of national significance. And we've just heard about the Northlands motorways and the proposed there. And I would have thought that the ferries were actually part of the network, and the fact that they've been ignored, and that contract, which was signed in 2021, 550 million, and they're saying now that those ships to be purchased now or to be built with the new contract would be 40% more, those 2 same ships. Now, I had quite a bit to say about that, but a lot of it's been answered by Don, so I won't think, but there was no plan B. There's absolutely no plan B with the cancellation of that contract. There's a break fee, which Don did mention, and I've heard or read that it could be as much as 200 million. So a $550 million contract, a break fee of 200, plus what Don said about the infrastructure that's already been built. So, you know, the logic I just can't understand the logic, quite frankly. But listening to Don, I thought, there could be one reason or one thing that this company could do. With that contract, which I think has been cancelled, but it may be able to be restored, who knows, that Mainfreight has a bit of power with its share price, with its shareholding, that may be a small rights issue, just to raise a small amount of money, and take those ships on and look at a contract with the government where they do the infrastructure and Mainfreight owns the ships. You know, with a $70-odd share price, it wouldn't need much to raise 500 million. It's a bit of a call. I didn't really come with that idea, but I just heard the comments and I thought, yes, I'll say that anyway. So yeah, I just think it's quite a sad day for New Zealand, quite frankly, that when they cancel that thing. And being a South Island originally, it's an absolutely important network, and it was such a good deal. And they talked about the inflation and all the rest. Where hasn't there been any inflation when you talk about building costs and land costs in the last, well, even 5 years since that contract was signed, or 4 years? So that's my little threepence worth. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We've heard that it's more than 400 million lost in the cancellation of the ferries, and we know nothing about running ferries, and I think it's so important that people on the ferries who know about ferries, and obviously the government doesn't know much, but there are plenty of people in the railway system and so on who do know how to operate rail ferries. But we have seen Faye Richwhite, Toll Australia, all have a go at owning the rail, giving it back or selling it back to the government, making money out of it themselves, and just giving it back in a dilapidated state. Feel very strongly and unhappy about that. And we don't need a private company in the middle owning the rail as distinct from the railway themselves.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Steve Mabb's my name. I am from Australia, so I feel like I'm in enemy territory, but I'm also a significant shareholder, so hopefully amongst friends.
We stopped making Australian jokes in Mainfreight 30 years ago.
Fantastic.
We said they are our friends.
Well, it's good to see that Australia is making a great contribution to the business today, so hopefully everyone appreciates that. I just got a question for you on that note. It was very difficult for me to actually buy shares in the company. So I'm wondering if the board's recently considered any kind of alternative listing outside New Zealand. Obviously, there's some other great New Zealand companies that have gone down that path. They're much smaller businesses than ours and they trade on much higher multiples. So have we got any interest in opening ourselves up to some extra capital outside the world? And also note 3/4 of our staff are outside New Zealand. 3/4 of our team, our business is outside New Zealand. And there's very little awareness of the business in Australia because we're not listed there or we're not, frequently reported in the business press there. So there might be some side benefits that come as well from opening up the listing beyond just NZ, where it's very difficult to get access unless you are in NZ.
We think that we have become well known in Australia in the transport and logistics area. We don't strike people now who say, "Who are you?" And I think we will become a dominant player in there. Whether or not we have an interest in being on the Australian Stock Exchange or not, I don't think companies should move themselves around to alternate bourses, is that the right word? For the sake of getting their share price up. We are a New Zealand company and using our New Zealand style, and at this point we don't particularly wish to be on the Aussie Stock Exchange.
If I can just make a couple of comments, I think it comes with a whole lot more risk, a whole lot more bureaucracy. I mean, you have to excuse me, but having been in Australia the last couple of weeks, I see, we have to declare our sexuality as a director, whether we're a he, she, I, whatever. I mean, it's nuts over there. And I mean, this exchange is nuts enough as it is. But if you've got a problem buying shares, please give me a call. I'm sure I can put you in touch with a good broker, and it shouldn't be that hard. I mean, our own people in Australia own shares. And I take the point that it might give us a bit more coverage in the Australian Financial Review. Some of that might not be the best coverage we want. But, as to Bruce's point, in the marketplace with the customers that grow our revenue, they know who we are now. And it's taken a long time. And as Simon noted today in our board meeting, the impatience, it's taken 30 years. But we're around for 100, right? So we'll take our time and we'll find our way. When this question comes up often, why the ASX? Why wouldn't we then think about the NASDAQ? Yeah, I know, but you know what I mean? Like at some point in time, it might have to be the NASDAQ. That's my point.
Which is an even bigger pool of companies.
Yeah.
I just want to make it easy for people to buy into the company that aren't from NZ, basically. It doesn't mean we have to take ourselves off the NZX.
Oh.
It's more just for the rest of the world, how we make it easy for people to invest in business.
Well, maybe that's to do with the system, isn't rather than the company. And I don't think that we should be making rash decisions because the system can't make it work. Anyway, thanks for being a shareholder. It's bloody great.
Sorry, not the answer you probably wanted, but it's the truth at this point, yeah. Any more questions? Okay. We'll now move on to the resolutions to be considered today. Each of the resolutions is an ordinary resolution required to be passed by a simple majority, being more than 50% of the eligible votes cast. Voting at today's meeting will be by way of poll and after the 5 resolutions have been introduced to the meeting. The board holds discretionary proxies in respect of the resolutions as shown on the screen behind me. With respect to Resolution 1, the election of Annie Steele, 78,087 shares, million, I'm sorry. With respect to Resolution 2, election of Hayley Buckley, 77,887 million, mate. Okay, thanks, Joe. With respect to Resolution 3, re-election of myself, 79,428 million. With respect to Resolution 4, authorising the director's retirement payment to Richard Prebble, 83,927 shares. That's excellent. With respect to Resolution 5, authorising the directors to fix the fees and expenses of the auditors, 81,861. Voting at today's meeting will be by way of poll after all 5 resolutions have been introduced to the meeting. There will be an opportunity to ask questions on or speak to each resolution. I ask that in the interests of fairness to all shareholders attending this meeting, anyone wishing to speak to a resolution be concise and considerate to other shareholders who may also wish to ask questions. Please also state your name. We'll now proceed. The election of 2 new directors, Annie Steele and Hayley Buckley. In accordance with the NZX listing rules and the company's constitution, Annie and Hayley were appointed by the board on the 1st of March 2024 and may hold office only until this annual meeting, but are eligible for election at this meeting. The board of Mainfreight fully supports the election of both Annie and Hayley, and we will give you the opportunity to hear from each of them before putting the motion. Annie Steele has considerable experience across complex corporate transactions and strategic advisory engagements. Annie is a partner of a specialist corporate law firm, Harmus Horton Lusk, and regularly advises listed companies on board-led strategic projects. Annie has a Bachelor of Laws and a Bachelor of Arts in French and Chinese. Annie's energy and commercial expertise, along with her trilingual background, are welcomed by the team. Annie, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Bruce. Good afternoon, all. I'm very pleased to be here with you today. In my first few months as a director, I've visited parts of the business and I've met some of our customers. I've been able to spend some time with the team who have been so generous with their own time, from supply chain basics with the training team, to IFRS 16 accounting with Tim and Graham, to Bruce's recounting on the road of turning countless problems into opportunities. My understanding of the business is expanding, but I recognise I have much to learn. I asked the customers I met why they chose Mainfreight. Almost invariably, the answer they gave me was our people. They spoke of their can-do responsiveness, and that is something so powerful in a decentralised model like ours. You don't have to spend very much time in one of our branches, and I know this from first-hand experience, to see and feel the passion of our people, the way they care for our customers, the freight, the premises, and each other. The potential of a company with these attributes on a global scale, and I say that aspirationally, is exciting. So why am I here? When I was first approached to gauge my interest in a board role at Mainfreight, I was struck by the overlap between the Mainfreight story and my own, and our shared ethos. My parents moved our family here to New Zealand when I was 6. I wasn't old enough then to understand the bravery of leaving the bright, comfortable city lights of Hong Kong for a small rural community in Hamilton. For this big city girl, it was quite the adjustment. But my parents did that because they were determined to give us the education they felt they missed out on, growing up during the Cultural Revolution in China. That time of their lives was a period of such upheaval. In our home, learning was compulsory, and you had to be a self-starter with ambitious goals. I've heard Don describe the team as an ambitious bunch of so-and-sos. I can relate. Watching my parents build a new life for themselves, not speaking a word of English in this country, has taught me the value of hard work, of having a ferocious resolve. But it has also taught me to observe people, to invest in them with a long-term vision to succeed as a collective. What I have learned from my parents and my mentors along the way is what I practice in my profession and is what I see in the Mainfreight family. I've built a career in law developing long-term relationships, providing strategic advice to boards and business owners in difficult and high-stakes situations. That requires many skills: an ability to absorb and process facts quickly, a strong and practical knowledge of the law, care and clarity of thought and language, and the capacity to carry a very high workload. I bring sound commercial judgment to my clients' problems and a commitment to being the very best and delivering the best outcomes for them. These are all the things I will bring to my directorship at Mainfreight. For me, being a director of this special company is not a stepping stone to a professional governance career. My natural curiosity and reflex to embrace an opportunity kicked in when I was asked. It wasn't about padding out a CV. It was about Mainfreight, an iconic homegrown success story, and being a part of the next 100 years of the journey. I care deeply about the contribution I make while I'm here. On the subject of contributions, I'd just like to conclude by acknowledging Richard for his 28 years of service. Richard, we wish you all the best. Thank you everyone.
I've been made aware that the numbers I quoted there were not the same as on the board. I'm not sure what effect that is happening. I've got it down there in front of me now. Is there any discussion on the resolution appointing Annie to our board? Okay, there being no discussion, we'll now move to the next resolution. Hayley Buckley joins us with a significant experience across corporate transactions and complex commercial law arrangements. Hayley is a partner and the chair of law firm Wynne Williams. She has both New Zealand and international, London and the US, experience across a number of business sectors, including transport and logistics. She's a member of the New Zealand Institute of Directors, is an alumni of the Harvard Business School 2019, and has been admitted to the High Court of New Zealand and the Supreme Court of England and Wales. I'll now ask Hayley to address the meeting.
Go for it.
Thank you, Bruce. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Hayley Buckley, and you will have read and heard my professional bio. But as I mentioned to Don, I think just last week, whilst the law is what I do, it's not necessarily just who I am. It's a real privilege to be here today and to have this opportunity to formally introduce myself to our shareholders and the Mainfreight family. I love Mainfreight. I've been passionate about Mainfreight for many years. As mentioned, my professional background is in commercial and corporate law, and I have spent some time, 10 years in fact, overseas, working for an English and a US law firm. And during that time, and my time back in New Zealand, with experience in 3PL and 4PL sector, and a bit of a passion for the frozen and chilled sector in that space. I'm currently a partner and chair, as said, at Wynne Williams, which is a national law firm in New Zealand. I've always had an entrepreneurial mindset. Some of what Annie says resonates with me. I think that's growing up with entrepreneurial parents. And when I came back from London, from one of the biggest law firms in the world, I sort of had a look around and thought, what do I want to do now, and how do I want to do it? And the opportunity arose to set up the Auckland office of Wynne Williams, which is a very old Christchurch law firm at the time. That was 11 years ago. So there was two of us in a shoebox-sized office, thinking, right, how do we want to do this? And my fellow partner, who's now the managing partner now, we sat down and we said there are three things that are essential to us. We need to provide the highest service. We need to work with people who we trust and respect, and we need to work for people who we trust and respect. And I think those values align strongly with Mainfreight's values, and they've been very successful. Today, in Auckland, we have 50 team members and significant revenue, and we've had a heck of a lot of fun along the way. My interest in Mainfreight was first peaked around 5 years ago, and that was just when I was working with some other, I was going to say global, but I'll call them international industry participants. And then after some back surgery over one summer, I read the Mainfreight story, Ready, Fire, Aim, and for any of you who have read that, I mean, I couldn't put it down. Mainfreight has an intangible magnetism. This is how I described it to Bruce when we met in January. And in my short time since joining the board in March, I have truly felt this from walking through our warehouses, when sharing lunch with the teams throughout our multiple site visits. We've been through New Zealand, Shanghai and Australia, and right through to engagement at the board table with management and my fellow directors. This is how I can best reflect back to you how the culture feels. Always talk about the culture of Mainfreight. That's how it feels. And it also speaks to the presence, power and importance of a deeply connected, cohesive and coordinated network, which I can assure you we have. I can assure you that I will act diligently and with rigour as a director. And the way that I'd like to do this and commit that I'll do this is by balancing patience and the respect that is required to deeply understand our business, but with curiosity and courage to challenge and question where appropriate. I'm passionate about Mainfreight and its people and its 100-year philosophy. I believe I can serve shareholders well, and I'll make every effort I can to contribute to the success of Mainfreight. And finally, I'd like to extend my respect and thanks to Richard Prebble albeit that our paths have crossed briefly. It's been an absolute privilege, Richard, so thank you very much. Thank you.
So we have Resolution 1 and 2, I believe, that Hayley Buckley and Annie Steele be appointed to the board and, being eligible, having offered themselves for election, be elected as directors of the company. Voting is for 61,748,624 and against 94,328. Oh, that's for Hayley. Okay. Is there any discussion on either of these two resolutions, the appointment of Hayley and the appointment of Annie? There being no further discussion, we'll now move to the next resolution. In accordance with the NZX listing rules and the company's constitution, myself, Bruce Plested, retires by rotation and, being eligible, am available for re-election. You've heard enough from me, so I'll now hand the meeting over to Don Braid.
Thanks, Bruce. The Board of Mainfreight fully supports the re-election of Bruce Plested. As the founder and chairman, he continues to play an integral role in our journey. His values, philosophy and foresight continue to inspire and challenge us. Bruce's leadership and mana continues to motivate the family of Mainfreight across all four corners of the world. The principles the company was founded on and the catalyst for our unique culture, which continues to attract team members, customers and shareholders alike. Likely one of the many reasons why you have invested in Mainfreight. Bruce has served as chairman since 2001 and is not considered by the board to be an independent director. Thank you. Is there any discussion or questions on the resolution?
Bruce, you look fitter and younger than at the AGM last year. So you just keep turning back time and hang in there.
Does anyone else want to play up to him? Okay, no further discussion. We'll now move to the next resolution. I'll hand back to Bruce.
Thank you, Don. The Board of Mainfreight fully supports the director retirement payment to Richard Prebble, who steps down from his directorship. Richard will receive 12 months director's fees totaling $120,000 for his service as a board member since 1996. 28 years of blemish-free service, where his contributions have assisted our growth and development, apart from the road user charges. No matter the location of our next branch or country, 171 board meetings around the world and 29 annual shareholders meetings. As you are all aware, the travel and commitment called upon by the company is not for the faint-hearted. Richard has made a significant contribution to the success of Mainfreight. Richard has benefited our team, customers, and shareholders alike. He also has never put in for expenses for driving from Rotorua to Auckland or flying, mostly because he can't fly, it's too unreliable. But it's, he has not been one who has had his hand out for anything. Is there any discussion on this resolution?
Thank you. Alex Ball, New Zealand Shareholders Association. First of all, obviously want to echo Bruce and the fellow board members' comments around Richard's long tenure, 28 years of service, very significant contribution to the success of Mainfreight. However, it won't come as a surprise to the company, the Shareholders Association's stance on this one. There has not been retirement payments made by NZX-listed companies since the 90s, and it is not considered leading practice by a number of institutions, including the Institute of Directors, nor the ASX, although you're not going to the ASX anytime soon, according to the Group Managing Director. So just a comment really that we will be voting undirected proxies against the resolution on that basis.
That's fine. Thank you, Alex.
Well, thanks. Mr. Chairman, Alan Best again. I'd just like to support Alex in the opposition to this resolution. And I would like you, I am conscious of the fact that I've supported Richard's re-election on a number of occasions, and that I thought that he brought a different perspective from almost anyone else and anyone who's possible to the deliberations of the board. So I admire his work and I admire the company. But I just remember some of the things that did start off in the 90s, when New Zealand was actually considered the wild west of capital markets. And as we progressed from that stage, the Shareholders Association, and we made submissions which were taken up by people like Dr. Roderick Dean and so on. And I remember that as I joined the association, right in the early stages, the Shareholders Association said that the directors' stipends were actually too low, and that we agreed with Dean at that stage that directors' fees should be raised and that we would help with that. But we would oppose any suggestion of golden parachutes and golden handshakes. And we have stuck to that right the way through, even though under the section 211.4 of the rules does allow for the resolution that you're putting forward. And the reason, of course, is pretty simple. We thought that small shareholders like ourselves actually wanted this to occur. It was part of a really bad scene in New Zealand, and one that Simon Power and others were able to correct. So over the years, we've constantly voted against such suggestions. Most of the time, we haven't even need to put them to the vote. And deserving as Richard is of some recognition, our view is that the rewards for successful directors should and do come from increasing market price of their shares. And we encourage always that directors own shares in the company that they serve. So we see the payment of a retirement allowance as being unnecessary and a backward step in the governance of Mainfreight. And I would urge shareholders to vote against the resolution.
Thank you. There's the Aussie. Here we go.
Yeah, I wouldn't exactly echo all of those sentiments, but one of the board's job and Don's key jobs is the allocation of capital. And I can think of so many better ways we could allocate 120,000. With no disrespect to Richard, he's done a wonderful job over many years, but I would guess index for inflation, we've probably paid Richard $2 to $3 million in total director fees over the 28 years. So I can't for the life of me understand why we now think it's a good way to spend $120,000. Again, no disrespect to Richard, but how many other ways could we invest that money?
Okay.
Yeah, William Cairns, I totally support that payment and what the board is doing. Thank you.
Thank you, William. No more questions? It is, it's not cast in stone that we will always do that. I believe in this case that we got a very special political director who gave us some protection and some knowledge in areas that we had no experience at all in. And I don't think that we are creating a precedent as far as our company is concerned in paying this amount. I feel really honoured to be able to do it. I would add that when we took over one of the companies, the public companies here in New Zealand, the directors had voted themselves 3 years of directors' fees if they got taken over. So that's the sort of corruption that has existed, and it certainly doesn't exist in Mainfreight. We will now move to the next resolution, and the last item on the agenda is to authorise the directors to fix the fees and expenses of the auditor for the ensuing year. Is there any discussion on this resolution? Okay. There being no further discussion, that concludes the agenda items. We'll now vote on the tabled resolutions by way of a poll. Shareholders who are entitled to vote and proxies who have discretion as to how they vote will have received a proxy voting form prior to the meeting or have been issued with a form when they registered upon arrival at the meeting. If you submitted a proxy prior to the meeting, you do not need to complete another proxy or voting form. If you do not have a form, please go to the Computershare desk at the entrance where their representative will be able to assist you. After voting, Computershare may come around to collect your proxy voting form in one of their ballot boxes. Please ensure you sign the form. We will attempt to have the votes counted as quickly as possible, but usually it doesn't happen. And I hope to be able to announce whether the resolutions have been passed before you leave. Otherwise, the results of the poll will be advised by way of a release to the stock exchange tomorrow morning. Are there any other matters shareholders would like to discuss before I declare the meeting closed? This is an opportunity for shareholders to raise any matters they wish to. Right, we come to the conclusion, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes the formalities. I declare this 29th annual meeting closed. However, before we adjourn for refreshments, we would like to make a special presentation to our retiring director and friend, Richard Prebble, to show our appreciation for his years of dedication and commitment to Mainfreight. Richard, could you please join Don and I?
Do you want to say a few words? Hang on. It's not.
Well, thank you, Bruce and Don, but I don't feel in any way entitled to wear this cloak. When I joined the board, we did a float, and the share price was $1.20, and when I looked at it this morning, it was $77. And yet, one of the questions I frequently receive is, why don't we follow the template of the other companies on the share market who haven't done as well as we have? To me, the answer is so obvious that I find difficulty answering it. But instead, let me upset those people who think we should follow that template by letting you know, since I'm leaving and you've all voted, we're a special company and we don't follow it probably far more than you realise. People think I'm a politician who became a director. Actually, I was a director before I went into Parliament, while I was in Parliament, and since. I haven't added it up, but my director experience would be over 150 years. I've been a Mainfreight director longer than I was a member of Parliament. And on top of that, I was put in charge of all the government businesses, 23 of them, about 10% of the total investment of New Zealand, and I had to appoint the directors for all of them. And I quickly discovered that the search for a template for business success doesn't exist. There were a number of government companies who had the perfect governance. Only problem was the results. And what I discovered was that there are two qualities that all the successful companies had. Just two. The first was they all had a chairman who was wise. And Bruce Plested is not just a business pioneer, he's a very wise man. People ask me, where do those sayings come on the back of the trucks? They're the sayings of Bruce. Many of them are his original sayings, and he is an amazing chairman. And the second thing that every successful company had in common is they had an outstanding CEO. Don Braid is simply New Zealand's best CEO. No doubt in my mind about that at all. And now here's how we differ. On companies' boards that I've been on, we spend 3 months of the year doing an annual plan and the rest of the year arguing about why we haven't met the objectives. Mainfreight doesn't do annual plans. Yes, we do have a plan, and that's to do better than last year. Yes, we do have an objective, and that is to double the size of the company every 7 years. And yes, we do have a vision. It's a 100-year vision. We're in 27 companies, and as Don mentioned to you, there's another 170 to go. On boards that I've been on, we spend huge amounts of management and board time on feasibility studies. Most of them fall into one of two categories. Either looking at something the company's got to do anyway, so it's procrastination, or the management is trying to persuade the board to go into something that we don't know anything about. Well, we don't do feasibility studies in Mainfreight either. And in those other companies, the boards delegate their responsibility to consultants. Well, Mainfreight doesn't do consultants either. I've actually been on government-appointed boards where the management's invited to hire consultants to tell the board how much to pay the management. Now, you'll be astounded to hear that not one of those consultants ever recommended that the management was overpaid. Not once. In fact, I've never seen a consultant's report that actually says to the board what the management's proposing is nuts. That's how you get consultants' reports suggesting that we have bicycle ways over the Harbour Bridge. Well, Mainfreight doesn't do that either. What we've got, though, is a chairman who had a brilliant insight, one that you and I could have had, that there's a demand for quality logistics, for a company that delivers the freight in the condition that it was received, on time, to the correct destination, every time. Now, actually, other logistics companies have had that, and they thought what we need is good IT. We've actually got some competitors overseas that actually don't do any freight movements themselves, they're just IT companies. Well, you can imagine how they got on last weekend. What makes Mainfreight different is Bruce's insight is that if the loader doesn't load the freight on time, loads it on the wrong truck or drops it, you haven't got quality freight. But it's more challenging than that. in our branches around the world today, there will be a branch that's facing situations that occur in logistics. There's a flood, the road's out, the rail ferry's not working, there's a pandemic, or there's an earthquake. And what you need then is quality people. I'd like to give you many examples of how good your quality is, but here's one that I remember. On the Monday after the Christchurch earthquake, the supermarket that we provide logistics for in Christchurch realised they were going to run out of bottled water. So they rang up the Mainfreight depot and Mainfreight warehouse in Auckland and said, how soon can you get us bottled water? And the answer was, in about an hour. And our team explained that when they heard about the Christchurch earthquake on the Sunday, they went into the warehouse, thought about what the customers in Christchurch would need, and one of them was bottled water, and they loaded up a truck and trailer full of bottled water. And the supermarket in Christchurch said, look, that's wonderful, but I've got bad news for you. The main highway, Kaikoura, is blocked. There's a 3 kilometre long queue of trucks trying to get through. And our team said, yeah, we know about that. The truck went down the west coast, over the Alps, and he's 1 hour away. Here's his number, give him a ring and let him know we want it delivered. The competitor supermarket didn't have water for days. That's what quality gets you. But how do you get quality? It's the team members that you have and supporting them. There's a bit of a mention about the bonus. I've had shareholders say to me that that's not in the template. That's money that ought to go to the shareholders. And I've got you 3 answers to that. One, it's not a bad idea to share the profit with the people who actually did the work. But the second one is this. That's our shock absorber. That's how we are able to pay and have never missed a dividend in 28 years. But there's a third reason which is even more important. That's why we've never done a mass redundancy. In the 28 years that I've been on the board, I've seen competitors, some of them, do redundancies 3 times over that period. Look, doing redundancy of your best people is like eating your seed capital. It's crazy. During the pandemic, we didn't pay a bonus to anyone, but we kept everyone. And that is why I'm actually very optimistic about how we are right at the moment, because every recession has resulted in a greater market share, and when we've come out of it, we've been in a position to be able to take advantage of it. So I'm a member of the Remuneration Committee. I strongly recommend to you shareholders that you continue to support that. But I must say that as a member of the Remuneration Committee, I have been negligent in one matter. Every year we adjust the wages annually. We do the management every 2 years. And we haven't adjusted the directors' pool for 5 years. That might come as a bit of a surprise to you, but there's been a bit of inflation in the last 5 years. And it's great giving advice when you're leaving, but my advice to the board has been that we should do wages every year, the management every 2 years, and we should adjust the directors' pool every 3 years, and I hope that the directors bring such a resolution to us next year. You know, when I explain all that to people about the template and the like, they then turn around and say, well, that's all very well. What happens when Don and Bruce decide to retire? Well, this is my answer. Mainfreight has the longest management succession plan of any company I've ever seen. I like to think as a director, I'm sometimes more like a director of a co-op. Every one of those 337 branches is in many ways an independent business. They've all got their own balance sheet, profit and loss, and they report the profit or the loss each week, which is we as directors see. That's one reason why Mainfreight is able to adjust so quickly. The branch managers, apart from that, are free to manage the branch within a few blue principles. They are unbreakable Mainfreight principles. And one of them is this: when they hire a new team member, they must ask 2 questions and get a positive answer from both of them. One is, could I imagine this person is capable of selling logistics? And logistics actually requires intelligence to sell in logistics. Might come as a surprise to you to know that Don Braid's not only our manager, but he's also our biggest salesperson. And every branch manager should be the biggest salesperson of that branch. So you need a positive answer from that. And I like to think that we've got 10,600 salespeople in Mainfreight. And the second question is the branch manager must ask, can I imagine that this person could one day manage the branch? And if the answer is yes, then they hire them. So we've got 10,000 people in our management succession plan. Those 337 branch managers, some of them are managing significant businesses with hundreds of team members. They are learning how to make decisions. And then we have the people who run air and ocean transport and warehousing, and they're big businesses. And then on top of that, we've got 5 people who we call country managers. Well, it's actually, they're more than just a country. We've got somebody managing Europe, someone managing the Americas, someone managing Asia, a manager for Australia and for New Zealand. All of those managers are managing more complex and bigger businesses than Mainfreight was 28 years ago. Any one of them is capable of actually becoming the CEO of the company. The big problem the board's got will be choosing. And then you might say, well, will they be as good as Don? Of course not. But Don, 28 years ago, was not as good a manager as he is today. The thing you need to understand about leadership is that the only way you really learn to lead is to lead. No one's ever ready. But that person, whoever we appoint, will rapidly grow to be able to do it. I'm a Mainfreight shareholder and intend to stay one, but I'll tell you what would make me sell. If I read sometime in the future that Don Braid has retired and that the board has decided to appoint a firm of consultants to conduct an international search for a new CEO. How many great New Zealand companies have we seen destroyed by directors who have no faith in their management? And here's what I hope to hear. That Bruce, on his 100th birthday, has decided to step down from being chairman to just being a director. Don's taken over as chairman, and the country manager for Africa has been appointed by the board to be the new CEO. And at that point, I will have that feeling that I'm sure all of you have had. I wish I had more Mainfreight shares. Thank you very much. It's been a great ride.
We want to recognise your input as well, because how you put up with him every day, I'm not so sure. But thank you so much.
We now invite you to join the directors and some of our Mainfreight team members for refreshments. It's always a pleasure to meet so many of our shareholders who we now know so well. Thank you very much.